is the first listed disorder in this section. In this section, they make a clear point that the vast majority of individuals whose symptoms meet the criteria for a fully syndromal manic episode also experience major depressive episodes during the course of their lives. But it is no longer the case that one has to have evidence of depression or a depressive episode in addition to the manic episode to qualify for a diagnosis of bipolar 1. So that's an important distinction. The diagnostic criteria for bipolar 1 include having at least one manic episode, and that manic episode is defined by 4 criteria, A through D. Criteria A is a distinct period of abnormal and persistently elevated, expansive or irritable mood, and abnormally and persistent increased activity or energy lasting at least 1 week and prevalent most of the day, nearly every day, or any duration if hospitalization is necessary. So, if you're hospitalized for a manic episode, you've met criteria A. Otherwise, it needs to be marked. It needs to stand out. There's persistent hyperactivity or intense energetic bursts. It's at least a week long, and it's most days in that week. You could have an irritable mood, or a super expansive mood, or a super elevated mood, but it's notably manic in presentation. Criteria B says that during the period of mood disturbance and increased energy or activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms, or if the mood is only irritable, 4 or more of the following symptoms are present to a significant degree and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior. So criteria B is a marked change in behavior, that if the manic episode does not have the abnormally persistent elevated, expansive, increased activity, energy moods, and it only has the irritable mood, then you need to have 4 of the 7 possibles under criteria B. Otherwise, you have to have 3. These are inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. It's the first one. The second one is decreased need for sleep. Feels rested after, say, 3 hours. The third one is more talkative than usual, or pressure to keep talking is felt. Number 4 is a flight of ideas or subjective experience that thoughts are racing. Number 5 is distractibility. Their attention is too easily drawn to an unimportant or irrelevant external stimuli, either by report or by observation. So they're just super easily distracted. Number 6 is an increase in goal-directed activity, either socially, at work, at school, or sexually, or psychomotor agitation, purposeless, non-goal-directed activity. So their motor's running super hot, and you can see it in their body, their motor agitation. Or they are driven. They're writing an entire book in 4 days. They're painting their entire house for 36 hours, and it's different than their normal presentation. And finally, number 7 is excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences. For example, they go on sexual indiscretion sprees, foolish business investments. They go on unrestrained buying sprees. People take off for other states. They hitchhike across the country and go gambling and put their house note on the table or something like that. So that's A and B under manic episode. C is that the mood disturbance is sufficiently severe to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning or to necessitate hospitalization to prevent harm to self or others, or there are psychotic features. So this is disruptive. It's not just they're, sewing a whole quilt in a week. They are either super agitated and they're going to hurt someone else in this agitation, or they might hurt themselves by their actions, even if those actions are very up and happy and excited actions, they're still dangerous. D, the final criteria, is that the episode is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or a medical condition. That's a separate diagnosis. So if there's another cause other than a mental illness on its own, no. So A, B, C, or D, and the note says a full manic episode that emerges during antidepressant treatments, for example, medication, electroconvulsive therapy, but persists at a fully syndromal level beyond the physiological effect of that treatment, is in fact sufficient evidence for a manic episode and therefore is enough for a bipolar 1 diagnosis. Criteria A through D constitute a manic episode. At least one lifetime manic episode is required for the diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Now, there's also the hypomanic episodes, major depressive episodes, and then there's a section of general criteria, coding levels of mild, moderate, and severe, and all of the specifiers. So with psychotic features, in partial remission, in full remission, unspecified. You can have with anxious distress, with mixed features, with rapid cycling, with melancholic features, with atypical features, with mood congruent psychotic features, with mood incongruent psychotic features, which means the manic episode and or major depressive episodes, with catatonia, with peripartum onset, so pregnancy, with a seasonal pattern. And these are all listed with a lot of notes. And so there are specifiers with rapid cycling or with seasonal pattern to describe the pattern of mood episodes. So getting back to the original set of criteria, after the manic episode criteria is met, the next part to examine are hypomanic episodes, which are a distinct period, criteria A, a distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, and abnormally and persistently increased activity or energy, lasting at least 4 consecutive days and present most of the day, nearly every day. So, very similar to criteria A under manic episode, except instead of a week, it's 4 days. Criteria B under hypomanic episode is during the period of mood disturbance and increased energy and activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms, 4 if the mood's irritable, have persisted and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior and are present to a significant degree. So, this is pretty similar to manic episode criteria B, and these 7 are the inflated self-esteem or grandiosity, decreased need for sleep, more talkative than usual or pressure to keep talking, a flight of ideas or subjective experience that their thoughts are racing, distractibility as reported or observed, an increase in goal-directed activity or psychomotor agitation, excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences, and those are those same types of behaviors under manic episode. Hypomania, criteria C, the episode is associated with an unequivocal change in functioning that is uncharacteristic of the individual when not symptomatic. The people that know this person well suspect something is not right. D, the disturbance in mood and the change in functioning are observable by others. Again, it's noticeable. E, the episode is not severe enough to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning or to necessitate hospitalization. If there are psychotic features, the episode is by definition manic. So it's not hypomania if you're mellow enough to continue at work, you're sustaining your relationships, you're not hospitalized, and you're not having delusions. If you are hearing voices, seeing things, having any of those psychotic features, you've had to go inpatient hospitalization, or you are getting sent home from work, you are standing out in the grocery store, stuff's happening, then it's not hypomanic, it's manic. Criteria F under hypomanic is the episode is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition, and this is very similar to the manic episode criteria. However, the note here is that a full hypomanic episode that emerges with antidepressants but persists at a full syndromal level beyond the physiological effect of the treatment is sufficient evidence of a hypomanic episode. However, caution is indicated so that one or two symptoms, particularly increased irritability, edginess, or agitation following antidepressant use, are not taken as sufficient for a diagnosis of a hypomanic episode, nor are they necessarily indicative of a bipolar diathesis, which I'm going to have to look up. The note for criteria A through F, so notice there's an E and an F in the hypomanic episode, which is different than the manic episode. Criteria A through F constitute a hypomanic episode, which are common in bipolar 1 disorder, but are not required for the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder. So one good solid manic episode is enough for that qualification. Major depressive episode is the third facet of the criteria. It has A, B, and C. Criteria A is 5 or more symptoms, and they have a list of 9. So 5 of 9 have been present during the same 2-week period. So not in different pieces scattered around, but over 2 weeks, 5 of these 9 are evident and represent a change from previous functioning. And at least one of the symptoms is one of the first two, which is a loss of interest or pleasure and a depressed mood. So those are both needed out of the 5 of 9 criteria. So really, it's the first two. Well, okay, you guess you have to have at least one of those, and that's why they say it like that. So you either have to have depressed mood or a loss of interest or pleasure in addition to 4 other symptoms off the list. Do not include symptoms that are clearly attributable to another medical condition. And so they're giving you the caution that just because you meet criteria doesn't mean you meet criteria. In other words, you have to think and make sure that this isn't due to something else. The 9 possibilities for a major depressive episode are depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, as indicated either by subjective report, feeling sad, empty, hopeless, or observations made by others, they appear fearful. In children or adolescents, the note says that it can be an irritable mood. 2, markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities of the day, nearly every day, as indicated by either a subjective account or an observation. So they're telling you or someone else is telling you. 3, significant weight loss when not dieting, or weight gain, which is 5% of your body weight in a month, or a decrease or increase in appetite nearly every day. In children, consider failure to expect weight gain. 4 is insomnia or hypersomnia, sleeping too little or too much every day. 5 is psychomotor agitation or retardation, which means you're either moving slow and lethargic and it looks weird, or you are moving too quickly, too frenetically, very agitated look to it. Either one of those are nearly every day, observable by others, not merely a subjective feeling of restlessness or of being slowed down, but it is notable, marked. 6, fatigue or loss of energy every day, so you're tired. 7, feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. Those could be delusional, nearly every day, not merely self-reproach or guilt about being sick, but really having a deep feeling of worthlessness or excessive inappropriate guilt. Number 8, diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness, nearly every day. And remember, this is a 2-week period, either by subjective account or by observation of others. So either you are telling us that you cannot focus and you can't make a decision, and that's happening almost every day over the past 14 days, or Somebody else is like, they cannot make a decision. I don't know what's going on. I tried talking to them and they can't follow my train of thought. They're not following through on the things they used to be able to do, and so forth. Those are the 5 of 9 out of criteria A. And remember that one of those 5 of 9 need to be either the depressed mood or the loss of interest and pleasure. B, under major depressive episode, is that the symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. And C, the episode's not attributable to medication or a medical condition, none of that. Criteria A through C constitute a major depressive episode. Major depressive episodes are common in bipolar 1 disorder, but are not required for the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder. The second note says that responses to a significant loss, for example, bereavement, financial ruin, a natural disaster, a serious illness, a disability, cancer, things like this, may include the feelings of intense sadness, rumination about the loss, insomnia, poor appetite, and weight loss noted in criterion A, which could resemble a depressive episode. Although such symptoms may be understandable or considered appropriate to the loss, the presence of a major depressive episode in addition to the normal response to a significant loss should also be carefully considered. In other words, it might just be a normal response to something really bad. Be cautious. This decision inevitably requires the exercise of clinical judgment based on the individual's history and the cultural norms for the expression of distress in the context of loss. So, bipolar 1 disorder, A, criteria have been met for at least one manic episode, criteria A through D under manic episode, and B, at least one manic episode is not better explained by schizoaffective disorder, so you can't have both, and is not superimposed on schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, delusional disorder, or other specified or unspecified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. So, if it's better explained by the stuff ahead of it in the DSM, it's not bipolar 1. It doesn't meet that criteria. The coding and reporting procedures. The diagnostic code for bipolar 1 disorder is based on the type of current or most recent episode and its status with respect to current severity, presence of psychotic features, and remission status. Current severity and psychotic features are only indicated if full criteria are currently met for a manic or major depressive episode. Remission specifiers are only indicated if the full criteria are not currently met for a manic, hypomanic, or major depressive episode. And these codes are as follows. And it's got the current or most recent episode is manic, and it's mild. That's F31.11. If it's moderate, it's 0.12, and if it's severe, it's 0.13. And then it says current or most recent episode is hypomanic. Well, those don't qualify, and it has little asterisks to clarify, which says, I am not seeing it. Well, I think it just means pay attention here. And then if the current or most recent episode is depression, then it's got a code for mild, moderate, and severe. And if the current or most recent episode is unspecified, then you're not going to give it a level. So the same if it's hypomanic or if you've diagnosed unspecified. Okay, so you also code bipolar disorder with psychotic features. And those differ depending on whether the most recent episode is depressed or manic. In partial remission has two different codes for that, but also a code for hypomanic. In full remission has all three codes, and unspecified has all three codes for either manic, hypomanic, or depression as the most recent episode. In recording the name of a diagnosis, terms should be listed in the following order: bipolar 1 disorder, type of current episode or most recent episode if bipolar 1 disorder is in partial or full remission, the severity, psychotic, or remission specifiers that I just listed, followed by as many of the following specifiers without codes as apply to the current episode or most recent episode if you are in partial or full remission. Note, the specifiers with rapid cycling and with seasonal pattern describe a pattern of the mood episodes. And so then you would specify with anxious distress, with mixed features, with rapid cycling, with melancholic features, with atypical features, with mood congruent psychotic features, and those apply to the manic or the major depressive episode. With mood incongruent psychotic features applies to the manic episode or the major depressive episode. With catatonia or peripartum onset or a seasonal pattern. And so any of those can be added to the bipolar 1 diagnosis in that following order. I'm going to stop there. That's bipolar 1. This is a 20-minute post to learn.